just sort of, I've had a lot of thoughts about this, which the first question will bring into view. So why don't we bring out the first question?
All right. So move on to question one. From an admirer of NLI's work, judging from what I have seen and heard on your otherwise excellent conference videos, I gather the NLI is determined to allow women to be open participants in this movement. Has the last 40 plus years not taught us that this is a slippery slope? Shouldn't those cognitive masculine women who genuinely support your movement and its proposed political reforms rather, as a sign of their sincerity and good faith, remove themselves from all NLI activities except providing support behind the scenes? Moreover, wouldn't such women more usefully dedicate their effort to guiding more naturally feminine women toward wiser life choices and appropriately feminine, hence non political settings? Is there not indeed an historical debt to be paid there by the strong women in question, recalling that their predecessors in the various feminist movements led the softer women to their doom as much by setting the wrong example of the politically active woman as by giving toxic personal advice?
What are you even talking about? We've had one woman participate so far as a guest speaker. Her presentation was entirely aligned with our work, and nonetheless, we're no longer collaborating. That is besides the point. What could have given you the impression that women could somehow attain a major influence in this organization other than if magically they really do operate like a man? You're too disagreeable and too wise to female tactics for them to have any effect other than the woman being removed. So while we don't keep women off the team, these selection pressures pretty much do. If any woman ever join, it will almost certainly not be in a leadership or intellectual role.
Yeah, I think Martin's right about the selection pressure. Of course, if we could have women that would fit, I don't know if any of us would have. I think we would just consider whether it was contributing or not. In other words, it was a net contribution or not. So Martin's correct here in that if you're a woman and you're used to using female intuition, your time radius, your whether something is uh, desirable versus true, if whether you were looking at the outliers, in other words, the Naxalts versus the main distribution. I mean, women are cognitively biased to think just the opposite of men in these matters. That doesn't mean that just as there aren't effeminate men, I can think of a whole bunch of them that are common on as left wing influencers on YouTube. Uh, just as there's feminine men that could not handle it here, there are masculine women who might. So and are while we have been concerned about the behavior of women for in other words, I love women. Uh, while we have been concerned about the institutionalization of the female means of warfare and social warfare, and the institutionalization of it, and the expansion and doubling down on it by the women alive today who are, again, demonstrating extraordinary mental health issues. Um, what am I hearing? I'm hearing something.
That's from me.
Yeah.
Every neighbor decided to start mowing the lawn.
You're what?
Neighbor decided to mow the lawn just
Oh,
now.
okay. So I thought you said your bird has started to do something, and I'm like, I didn't know you had a bird, Martin. How does the cat like it? Anyway, Martin, you ever see Martin pet the cat like Doctor? What is the James Bond villain?
I think it's actually Michael Myers in Doctor
Doctor Evil.
gosh, what is it? Alison Powers,
Austin
Doctor
Powers,
Evil.
but he's imitating the James Bond villain with the white cat. Anyway, um, so so uh, I I so the quandary I'm in versus you guys, which is the person who wrote this, is and probably Martin and Martin's factions, so to speak, or Martin's distribution that he's more aligned with, is that my standard of decidability is far higher. In other words, I might agree with you that there's this tendency and trend and risk. That would not stop me from trying to find a solution to it until I had exhausted all possible answers, so possibilities of solving this particular problem. And so I look at the problem sort of differently from you, and current events, the election, etc., and the observation of this vast number of samples of feminine meltdowns over the election, which is really it's not really mental expressions of mental illness. I view it as, okay, we have a problem. We've traditionally had a problem with women in needing asylums to contain them, but we have sort of written that off as too cruel. I would look at it as that instead that we have a problem we need to overcome, whether or not we include women in political decision making or in the institute or something like that. And my question is, how can we provide some mindfulness to women in modernity, especially when they've been told to be indisciplined, and fall into their intuitions and their instincts, instead of following what we've learned from civilizing and the cooperation between men and women over the millennia. So I view it as as not only a political problem to solve, but I view it as a moral problem and social and moral problem to solve. And so my concern is, I want to make sure, and I want to investigate, and I probably can solve it. I mean, religion was hard. This one is a derivation of the problem of religion. So can women be taught mental health? Well, it turns out that therapists are really good at it. They suck at it for men, but they're good at it for women. And so can we convert what they do with women in therapy from a corrective device to a preventative device, just as men develop sports as a preventative, not only a corrective, but a preventative device. So I'm pretty sure we understand how to do that. I think it would require the same level of effort that is currently going to be exerted by this administration, I guess, on health and on education. So I think that that the same restoration of male cooperative competitiveness is important because we see what happens in civilizations when males check out. On the other hand, the flip side is we have a far worse problem with women, and at scale, their behavior is even more deleterious. And the reason is, and this was put out by someone so elegantly yesterday, one of the typical thought leader, I mean, he's an intellectual, not one of the YouTube personalities, said that the basic problem is an asymmetry in our law, because men's antisocial behavior is visibly deleterious and easily policeable. The problem with women's behavior, not only in the public but in marriage, is that you can mandate a via negativa, which is that men have to provide and they have to not abuse, etc. But how do you mandate a positiva and enforce it with law, and that women have to be kind and caring and supportive, instead of undermining, seditious, gossiping whores, so to speak, in relationships? And so the problem is that we've spent more than 10,000 years civilizing men, and we gave women the same access to men 100 years as men 100 years ago. But the consequence is that we haven't suppressed domesticated female antisocial behavior. As a matter of fact, we've licensed it because it's the way by which the left was able to conduct the second attempted colonization of Western civilization. The first time by the Abrahamic cult through women, and secondly by the Marxist cult through men. And then they found that that wasn't working, so they used women for the race, sex, family, and cultural Marxism. So I view it as a project for us to solve. In other words, I view women as the production of mindfulness, or what you would call historically the replacement of religion, because that's what religion provides for women. The challenge we have to face, which is the positive expression of our legal negativa expression of how to prohibit their behavior. It's great to prohibit behavior, but you have to find some way of training the animal, so to speak. And women have less agency and capacity to self-regulate than men do, because men regulate each other because we can hurt each other real bad. But women tend not to self-regulate each other unless they have an interdependency. And so, in fact, what they do is follow the mean girl strategy of amplifying one another's antisocial behavior. So I see it as our next challenge, or as what I said was, I had originally planned on it being, how do we solve the problem of religion, which I really called the problem of mindfulness, in other words, self-regulation. How do we solve that issue? And I viewed it that we would solve that through some reformation of religion. I'm not sure anymore. I'm sure what I am more confident about is that we can solve the problem of mindfulness, but we probably have to solve it like we solved education. We have to institutionalize it. We can't leave it as a repair thing for those people who are on the margins. And so I see this as one of the multiple in other words, I see this in the history of the development of mankind as a normal progression, as my usual argument. As people are added to influence and polity, they are added there. They must take on responsibilities they heretofore did not have. And women must take on this responsibility if they want participation in the polity. So I don't think I think I talked to you guys about this last night, Francis, didn't I? Didn't I touch on some of this last night?
About women's role?
Yes, or this problem of women. If I didn't, then maybe it was Brad I talked to. I've forgotten who.
Yeah, it's probably Brad. Or maybe it was just after.
Yeah, Francis left.
Sorry?
Yeah, I had to drop early.
Okay. So, so I just view this as a realignment of how I saw the need to reform religion, and religion in my terms as the myths, the group strategy, the myths, the rituals, the arguments that bring about mindfulness in people. You know, if you look at Buddhist society, I mean, they're really freaking successful at it. It's just extraordinarily so. If you look at the Stoics, they were incredibly successful at it. If you look at the Epicureans, they were very successful at it. If you look at the church, they were reasonably successful at it. If you look at Islam, they're very successful at it, but they have it's a catastrophic consequence of the negative for it. The Hindus are fascinating how they handle it, mindfulness. though it lacks a degree of precision as a political order, it's genius. So I mean, we're just in the problem of Europeans being the most advanced civilization on the continuing adaptation to our knowledge about the laws of the world. And so we have to do the research and development that hopefully will affect others. So that's my argument about women in general is I'm not willing to just walk away and throw my hands up in the air and say give up if it means that we still have to suffer female social behavior. I'm not willing to just impose this law on people if we're not helping them get over it. And it's sort of like, well, men, we have more agency than women. Women have less agency, but more than children, and children have the least agency at all. So maybe we just have to be able to invest in helping people develop agency as much as we've helped people develop the ability to do reading, writing, and arithmetic. So that's my standing on this. That was actually a pretty good rant.
I'm gonna add one more point because the original the OP was simply asking whether we should whether masculine women should stay away from the NLI movement or to that nature. I'm just going to add 2 points. If they're contributing the peripheral, let's say, for example, online and so on, why not? As a member of the core staff, I do want to caution that anytime a woman joins a group of men, the men self-censors.
Yes.
So I
don't see it happening, but that doesn't mean I don't want to have women contribute, and especially when we just saw that women can shift, and they have, all right, for the right reasons. So I agree with you. And most of you know, I've had high performing women. Women make $350,000, $500,000 a year working for me. These are high performing women, but they never end up on the board. And the reason is they can't do it. And when they do, they bring the female bias to the boardroom, and that is probably useful in some companies that are consumer oriented, or certainly in companies that have certain market demands, right? But when you're just trying to make the hard judicial questions, I mean, we see this among judges, even judges on the Supreme Court. It's just very hard for women to do it. You could get a woman that's really capable, like what's her name, the one that died there.
The Jewish one.
Yeah.
Ginsburg.
That is not a stupid woman, right? But she couldn't do it. She could not make judicial decisions.
That's exactly why she was there.
Well, I know that's why she was there.
That's exactly why the 3 women are there currently.
And we're stuck with Sotomayor and what's the other one's name? Brown. I mean, these women they're not capable. I mean, they're just a wasted human, wasted spot on the team. So I am not in a position where I get to say comforting lies to myself about the sexual indifferences of the cognitive differences of the sexes. I mean, that's one of the primary features of my work. However, I'm not willing to give up on training, and so if we can train women, maybe we'd get there. So in any event, and you got to realize that the number of, I don't talk about this often, but the number of times where I've run a strategy for a company, and it turns out some fucking woman who has a CEO's ear, or some group of women has a CEO's ear, are killing the company. It would, and there's no way to say that internally, that's really obvious. Women are not. Men have open debates over performance, right? And they may not like each other, but they still make it work. But women's sedition by the manipulation of men and men's vulnerability to it is, and I'd have to include myself in that, is profound. Anyway, I love this question. It was a great question.
Okay, I'll respond to all that. The women that describe themselves as cognitively feminine, I've seen, yeah, compared to normal women, sure, but they have no idea what it's like to be us.
Yes.
There are no women like us.
No, and the degree which we recast empathizing as we look at empathizing when it's mostly projection is another thing we need to correct for. I mean, we have the solipsism, projection, empathizing spectrum, right? And sometimes women are empathic. A lot of times they're projecting. In other words, right? And other times they're solipsizing. And when you look at that spectrum, you see that's how the woman's cognition degrades. And even when you can get someone like, there's a Nobel Prize winning female economist who I adore, and she's passed now. And even when you get someone like that, she's provides the correct social science for the behavior, but the behavior she's seeking for is still to satisfy a feminine resistance to the presence of competition and conflict. So so yes, you're correct, Martin.
And as for the solutions, I'm always more inclined to just doing what worked for thousands of years instead of slapping a band-aid on the current system. If female influence doesn't work, then don't give them influence.
Right, and but this is a difference between your goals and mine, and I'm not disagreeing. I don't disagree with that might be a viable option. I disagree with myself. I'm not certain yet that there is no solution, and if a solution
is a solution.
What?
That is a solution.
What is it? No.
Wait, I'm sorry. What is the solution?
You got to pay attention because Mark's fucking with me. I don't believe I'm not to the point where I feel it's impossible to get women to be able to be regulate and be aware of their intuitions as evasions of responsibility for the public and common. I don't see that that's an impossible thing to do.
It is possible, but the regulation has to come from a man.
Well, that might be true, right? But I don't. You are, again. I keep running into this. It's not just you, Martin. Your standard is one of utility, right? And my standard is one of decidability. And so when I look at this, it's not yet a decidable question for me. It's definitely a choosable question, right? I mean, it's certainly where you're correct in assuming the answers. It's actually a much simpler question. It's a much easier question, right? It would certainly recover our civilization radically and quickly without question. But that doesn't tell me if the problem is actually solvable through training, just as people only had counting systems consisted of 1, 2, 3, and more, right? We have advanced mathematics. Well, I mean, I'm not sure that you can't do what we have done with Buddhism, for example, to women, or what we have done with Stoicism, we have done to women, or what we have done with Christianity to women. I'm not sure that can't be overcome without the supernatural nonsense. It seems to me that if one thing you'll see is in women's sports, they get a lot better. The women who play sports get a lot better. I mean, phenomenally better. You will still find the petty chick shit in the locker room and on the court. I mean, women are incredibly petty. You know, men, we just blow by that stuff as being a waste of our fucking time. But women don't. They're still practice pettiness. But the evidence is they can progress. So, I mean, who's the science commentator I adore, the German little German.
Sabine Haas something.
Yeah, it's not,
Hassenhofer.
yeah,
We need Marie to correct my pronunciation.
Hassenfelder.
Sabine Hassenfelder.
Yes. So, you know, that woman can think straight. I mean, absolutely can think straight. And so I'm like, okay, well, you know, that's proof it can happen. Is that I'm thinking of the other one. Sorry. So that's proof it can happen, but can we normalize it? In other words, intelligence does compensate for incapacity to self-regulate. It does. All right. So not completely, but it does do it. So if we can find, if it happens with Sabina, why can't it happen with more women? Who's the other one?
They're not like Sabina.
What?
Because they're not like Sabina.
Well, right. But is there a way to get them closer to that? Right. So
eugenics.
So here's the difference, Martin. You're willing to make the cut bait and make the decision now to change things, right? And if people got together and wanted to do that, I'm all in, right? Okay, fine. I wouldn't stop my inquiry to figure out if it was a solvable problem. So that's the only difference.
The point is, when something works, then we must be very careful in making a change. When something doesn't work, we should change it immediately to what worked before.
In other words,
wait, hold on. When something doesn't work, we should change it immediately. Well, lots of experience fail in the beginning until you tweak enough of parameters such that it starts working.
Yeah.
If we're just going to abandon when something does not work, I mean, what's a statistical? There are certain things that if you keep trying the same thing repeatedly, expecting different results, then that's definition of insanity. But if by your logic, then we're not going to really have any innovation at all.
Social innovations.
I don't know.
If you want to do that, then do that somewhere on a very small scale where it doesn't influence everyone.
So what you're saying, what Martin, I think you're saying is,
yeah, you should run I agree with that. Run experiments, especially social experiments, on a smaller scale, because it's complex enough that long with effect so far, oftentimes so far in the future, we just do not have enough foresight or data to be able to say whether this is going to work positively in the long run or not. So you want to start with control groups and small experiments.
And you certainly shouldn't be doing things when plenty of people can already explain to you why it won't work. Which
it turns out that the people who warned about women in the politics, they were right. Right? I mean, they were right.
Women themselves opposed it.
Yes. And then you got my favorite one of the women who get on there and they're crying and they say, "Who fought for us to work? What the hell?" Right? This is horrible. Whereas women spent most of their time in social milieu, not economic milieu, and it bound society together. It held our society together.
Yeah.
So what we did is we treated it as we treated the economic returns, and now our productivity is so high it doesn't matter. We treated the economic returns as without paying attention to the capital that women were creating in the society, and without it, we're falling apart.
It's a lack of social. It's a lack of full counting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and speaking of mindfulness, before let's first consider via negativa. Let's remove all the unnecessary stimuli that destroy mindfulness.
Yes. So let me conclude because I'm trying to satisfy this this I don't know. The reason it's good to have Martin and I here is because you get the two sides, right? I mean, that's the beauty of office hours. But I always say Martin's not wrong, right? But Martin's more concerned with application, right, to the efficient application and changing our lives today. And I have a more research and development oriented approach, which is I want to know if I can solve these hard problems. It turns out I can figure most of these hard problems out if I can frame the problem correctly enough to be able to pursue it. It's possible that this is an irresolvable problem because the effort we would put into making women capable of such decisions would impede their capacity to produce social harmony. Or
can treat exceptions as exceptions if we decide it's worthwhile, but we can't assume that's the norm.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. So this begs the question of, given that it's college-educated women that are, quote, the problem, and that women who get college educations are heavily biased to nonsense, right? Psychology, sociology, all this crap. So, and the fringe elements like studies, which only amplify their neuroticism and justify their neuroticism. And by justifying their neuroticism, they're suppressing their instinct for adaptation. And by the time they get out of college, they're 21, 22 years old. At that point, you've only got a couple years of biological adaptation left. So we're taking the period at which women are most adaptive, which is 14, 15 to 22. And we're making them burn it on hyper investment in what is effectively antisocial behavior that preserves their non-adaptation. Whereas one of the points of evolutionary advantages of having women in a polity is the adaptivity that they have, which allows them to enter more diverse circumstances, fit, and then transmit information between factions. So I just view this as a fucktastrophe across the spectrum. And if I spend more than 5 more minutes listening to Martin, I'm probably going to change my position altogether and say, yeah, Martin's right. Let's just let's just cut it out, and we'll you can figure out your research program later as a means of restoring female mental health. And I would, if the population would tolerate it, I would support it, because women have no place in politics as far as I can tell. Anyway.
Okay, I think we actually expanded way beyond what the OP has stated. He was simply asking about NLI when we talked about women
I
gender.
did it on purpose because